The moment you click this story, everything you thought you knew changed, and only on Kdrama Drops are we bringing you the truth behind the most unexpected press conference of the year. Because what Dylan Wang did next left reporters frozen and Miles Wei completely stunned. No one saw it coming. On what was supposed to be a quiet afternoon, invitations suddenly went out to major media outlets. The subject line was vague. A private press conference. No details. No hints. Just one name attached. Dylan Wang. When journalists arrived, the room felt different. The atmosphere was heavy. Cameras were ready. Whispers filled the space. Everyone expected the usual. A career update. A project announcement. But instead, Dylan Wang walked in with a calm expression that made everyone uneasy. And then the door opened again. Shen Yue's family walked in behind him. Gasps rippled through the room. This was not a coincidence. This was not accidental. This was intentional. Dylan Wang did not rush to speak. He took his seat slowly. He looked around the room as if measuring every eye watching him. Then he looked toward Shen Yue's family and nodded with deep respect. Reporters immediately understood that this was no ordinary appearance. Miles Wei was watching the live broadcast from a private location. At first, he laughed it off. Surely this was some misunderstanding. But the moment he saw Shen Yue's mother take a seat beside Dylan Wang, the smile vanished from his face. Something serious was happening. Back at the venue, Dylan Wang finally leaned toward the microphone. His voice was steady but filled with emotion. He said he had called this press conference because there were things that could no longer remain private. He spoke about responsibility, about respect, about standing up not just for himself, but for the people who mattered most. The room went silent. He spoke about Shen Yue not as a co-star, not as a rumor, but as someone whose life had been deeply affected by constant speculation. He acknowledged her family and thanked them for trusting him enough to sit beside him in front of the world. Shen Yue's father stood up. No one expected that. With a calm but firm voice, he spoke about the pain his daughter had endured, the pressure, the assumptions, the way silence had been misinterpreted. He said they were here because they believed it was time the narrative changed. Miles Wei felt his chest tighten as he listened. He had believed for so long that staying quiet was the right thing. That distance would protect everyone. But now Dylan Wang was doing the opposite. He was stepping forward, publicly, fearlessly. Back in the room, Dylan Wang addressed one question that had followed him for years. Why now? He answered simply, because waiting longer would only cause more harm. He said there were moments when people must stop hiding behind careers and schedules and speak as human beings. He said Shen Yue deserved peace. Her family deserved clarity. At that moment, Shen Yue's mother reached out and placed her hand over Dylan Wang's. Cameras zoomed in instantly. Miles Wei turned off the screen. Sources later revealed that he was in complete shock. Not anger, not jealousy, shock. He had not expected Dylan Wang to involve family. He had not expected this level of commitment. He realized in that moment that the situation was far deeper than he had ever understood. The press conference ended without chaos. No shouting, no drama, just a quiet sense that something important had happened. As Dylan Wang and Shen Yue's family exited together, fans around the world were left speechless. This was not a denial. This was not a confirmation. This was something stronger. It was presence. It was courage. And it changed everything. Miles Wei later shared with close friends that he finally understood why some stories cannot be paused. They must be faced. As the news spread, opinions flooded the internet. Some were shocked. Some were emotional. Some were silent. But no one was indifferent. Because when a man stands beside a family in front of the world, it means the story has moved beyond rumors. And this is why you must stay with Kdrama Drops, because this is where the stories do not end when the cameras turn off. This is where the real moments are uncovered. Subscribe and stay close because the next chapter is already unfolding and it will change everything you thought you knew. What happened after the press conference was far more powerful than the event itself. When the doors finally closed and the cameras were turned off, the weight of the moment settled heavily on everyone who had been present. Dylan Wang remained seated for a long time, staring at the empty chairs where reporters had been moments earlier. This was not exhaustion. It was realization. Shen Yu's family stayed with him. No one rushed to leave. There were no celebratory words, only quiet breaths and exchanged glances that said more than any statement ever could. Shen Yu's father finally spoke again. He said the hardest part of protecting a child is knowing when to stop shielding them and when to stand beside them instead. He admitted that fear had kept them silent for too long. Fear of backlash, fear of misunderstanding, fear of causing damage they could not undo. Dylan Wang listened carefully. He told them that fear had shaped his choices too. That there were nights he replayed conversations in his head, wondering what would have changed if he had spoken sooner. He admitted that success does not protect you from regret. Sometimes it amplifies it. Meanwhile, Miles Wei was not sleeping. The shock had evolved into restlessness. He paced his room, replaying the broadcast again and again in his mind. What unsettled him most was not the presence of Shen Yu's family. It was Dylan Wang's calm certainty. That certainty forced him to confront something he had avoided for years. Intentions do not erase impact. He realized that by choosing distance, he had left space for narratives to grow unchecked. He had believed silence was respectful. Now he saw how silence could also be interpreted as abandonment. The next morning, the industry felt different. Messages between managers were softer. Producers adjusted their tone. The atmosphere shifted from tension to cautious relief. People were no longer speculating wildly. They were processing. Shen Yue finally spoke privately that day. Not to the media. To herself. She acknowledged the pain she had carried quietly. The moment she smiled in public while feeling unseen in private. She understood now that her family stepping forward was not a betrayal of her privacy, but an act of love. For the first time in a long while, she felt supported without needing to explain herself. Dylan Wang chose not to give follow-up interviews. That decision alone sent a message. He had said what needed to be said. He did not need applause. Behind the scenes, he met with senior figures and made one thing clear. He wanted boundaries respected, not just for himself, but for Shen Yue and her family. That stance surprised many. It earned him quiet respect from people who understood how rare it is to choose integrity over convenience. Miles Wei eventually reached a point of clarity. He did not issue statements. He did not seek sympathy. Instead, he acknowledged privately that timing had not been kind, that paths diverge for reasons that are not always personal. He accepted that Dylan Wang's choice was not an attack. It was a resolution. As days passed, fans noticed subtle changes. Interactions felt lighter. Rumors slowed. Discussions became more thoughtful. People were no longer feeding on uncertainty. They were reflecting. Shen Yue returned to her work with renewed focus. Those close to her noticed a calm confidence. Not because everything was perfect, but because the weight of unspoken tension had finally lifted. The press conference had not solved every question, but it had restored dignity. And dignity changes everything. Looking back, insiders would later say that moment marked a turning point. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. Dylan Wang did not try to control the narrative. He reclaimed it. Miles Wei did not lose anything that day. He gained perspective. And Shen Yue gained something priceless. Her story back. Some stories do not end with reunions. Some end with understanding. And that is sometimes more powerful. This was never about choosing sides. It was about choosing truth over silence. And that is why Kdrama Drops exists. Because when the headlines fade and the noise quiets, we stay with the story. We follow the aftermath. We listen to what happens next. Subscribe to Kdrama Drops and stay close, because real drama does not end at the press conference. It begins when the world stops watching.